guys, JPals here. I've been playing Persona for a while now, ever since late 2018 actually. And since then, I've had the pleasure of playing through every single mainline title in the series. And almost every spin-off actually. As of uploading this video though, it's been nearly a decade since we first jumped through that stained glass window, and as such there's plenty of anticipation for Persona 6 to finally arrive, resonating within the fandom. If you want to get yourself or your friends into the series, now's the time. But getting into a 30-year-old game series can be daunting. I get that. Luckily, you've got a series vet here to help you find that perfect starting point. In this video, we'll be going over the newest edition of every title, meaning we're talking about a total 7 games. In short, we're going to be looking at the newest version of each title on a base level, i.e. the most accessible versions, and talking about why each game works or doesn't work as your first Persona title. That said, we'll go over any notable versions of other games that could work as solid recommendations apart from these 7. Without further ado, let's talk about these in chronological order of the original releases, meaning we're kicking things off with Persona 1 PSP is a very interesting beast to take on as your first Persona title, given how wholly different it is from the rest of the franchise. Not to say different is bad or anything like that, and seeing how mechanics evolve over time is absolutely a good thing. But this title is going to feel very different from the later entries. I'd say Persona 1's biggest strengths for being a starting title, outside of it being literally the first game, are in setting up the philosophy the rest of the series works off of, as well as how it is the only title to have 2 entirely different campaigns. Persona in general is all about discovering yourself and recognizing that you may have many different versions of yourself. While there is a version of you that is the most true to your beliefs, we all have our good, bad, and ugly sides, something put on full display during the main campaign. There's also a good amount of experimentation to be found in Persona 1 via themes such as the Velvet Room, trying to navigate demon negotiations, and the choice between optional party members, which is something wholly unique to Persona 1. With all of that said, Persona 1 is most likely going to be your jumping off point into the series under one of 2 trains of thought. You want to play the series from the beginning, or you're coming from old school Shin Megami Tensei. While I haven't played any of the mainline SMT titles unless Tokyo Mirage Session Sharp FE suddenly counts, combat can be very bare bones at the end of the day. You do your spell, you do some healing or do some damage, sometimes you do a critical hit. It's simple, yet also not. But that's not what this video is about. I can't say I personally recommend Persona 1 PSP as your first Persona title, but you can't really go wrong with any of these being your introduction at the end of the day. All about player's choice, no? Persona 2 Innocent Sin PSP, a fantastic title that in my opinion should not be your first. Before I get into all the negative though, let's start with why I think this would actually be a great first title. Aside from hitting the ground similarly quickly to Persona 1, both the combat systems and general story beats hit a lot harder than in Persona 2 Innocent Sin's predecessor. Fusion spells are a very awesome addition to the series formula, making sure you pay careful attention to what you place in your party in order to get the most bang for your buck with some of the stronger early game spells locked behind the system. Those fusion spells can also be further accentuated through the game's main claim to fame, the rumor system. When we went through school, we all knew that certain rumors could really make or break people. It doesn't really matter if you actually slept with a teddy bear until you were 16. If people found it plausible, that was absolutely going to affect your social standing. That sort of thinking carries into every fiber of Persona 2 Innocent Sin and its sequel, from matters as simple as what a shop carries to much more intricate plot beats I simply will not be spoiling here. With all that said though, why would I not recommend possibly my favorite game in the franchise as a launch pad? Well, Outside of several Persona 1 characters making an appearance in the game, meaning you'd want to play Persona 1 first to get the best appreciation for their inclusion, the game can be stupid easy on the PSP.
Did I overdo it?
This isn't exactly a problem on the PS1 version of Persona 2 Innocent Sin where hits genuinely have weight, but legitimately on PSP, you could stick with your starting Persona and its evolutions throughout the entire game without engaging in the Velvet Room and be just fine. Honestly, if it weren't for certain cutscenes in the game that drag you into the Velvet Room, Persona 2 Innocent Sin PSP could legitimately be a Trinity Souls situation, where you drop by the Velvet Room once, and then just never enter it again. Igor's really not needed here. Combat aside, this title still plays largely different from the newer titles, all the way down to the quote-unquote day-to-day. A huge core of Persona, the social systems, didn't exist until Persona 3, meaning in these quote-unquote old Sona games, you can't hang out with people to learn more about their past, you don't experience school life, you don't necessarily have a grounded experience at the beginning. Honestly, Persona 2 Innocent Sin jumps off the rails incredibly early. As soon as this first dungeon, thanks to a cutscene outside of school that I'm not spoiling. Y'all have fun with that. In addition, if you're of a type like me to where sometimes it might take days or even weeks to get back into a play session, you might end up getting decently lost with what you were doing last before falling back into the main plot, thanks to all of Sumaru City being accessible pretty early on. It's not as bad as, say, a Zelda situation if you're gone for a month, but it is a decently rough go if you find yourself relatively busy.
Yo everybody, we're back with Persona 2. I've almost forgotten what we were doing.
The modern games make sure you know exactly where you are, when you are, what you've worked on, and what you have coming up. But Persona 1 and the Persona 2 duology make for very hard sells as a result of the lack of these later quality of life additions. That said, as one of the last Persona games you play, it feels like a victory lap for the entire series. So try to keep a hold on this one until you've played everything else in the Persona series, aside from this game's sequel. Persona 2 Eternal Punishment PSP shares a lot of its DNA with Persona 2 Innocent Sin PSP, so I'm going to keep this section about as brief as I possibly can. Taking on control of one of the party members in Innocent Sin this time, Maya is our first taste of a female protagonist, something I'll always applaud. Maya, compared to the high schoolers you've led through the first two titles, is also a full-grown adult, and is surrounded by adults for much of the campaign. As such, you get a different atmosphere, one that's more grounded and serious in nature versus the high energy that comes from trying to figure yourself out in your youth. By that same measure, the party composition ends up being a nice peek behind the curtain into adulthood, dropping the illusion some programs like to go with where just because you're an adult does not mean you have your whole life figured out. Far from it, honestly. Speaking for myself. Now, with all that said, Eternal Punishment has a lot of the same cons Innocent Sin has, but at least the enemies hit for double and triple damage this time. There's still no social system, you still need a guide for a lot of the fusion spells, you can still go without the Velvet Room for a relatively good amount of time, though definitely not the entire game like last time. It carries a strong sense of familiarity, a sense the game wants you to have by design of its narrative. In said narrative, there's also a lot of callbacks to the events of Persona 2 Innocent Sin, as well as some Persona 1 matters, making Eternal Punishment a very rough game to recommend first. Honestly, it makes for a perfect game to play last, right after Innocent Sin. You should still play it at some point, of course, just maybe not from the jump. But hey, you do you! There's also the fact that the original game is in Japanese and therefore you need a translation patch, but, you know, small details, right? We jump straight from a PSP title into a game you can play on pretty much every console today, Persona 3 Reload. Every game from here on out is accessible on the newest hardware by the time of this video's release, with Reload being the newest release in the franchise, even if it's a remake of a PlayStation 2 title. Persona shines best when it hits its emotional threads, and centering your game's theme around death is a very easy way to make sure the heartstrings are pulled. Of course, you need to care about who is affected by that theme of death in order for it to hit, which Persona 3 does in spades, from its party members' stories all the way down to the side characters you can interact with via social links. And honestly, even beyond that, background NPCs can fit the mold fantastically depending on the plot beat. It is a bit weird that you can only interact with your female party members through the social links while their male counterparts are stuck with time-sensitive side stories, but at least we were given something, I suppose. Combat can also be quite fun to get into, thanks to each party member now having specialized traits. But those traits, in combination with the game's new flashy theurgy tool, make the game incredibly easy to snowball once you're able to make use of big flashy attacks that ignore enemy resistances and immunities. Also in the 50-50 column, Reload's second campaign, Episode Aegis. I won't spoil anything that happens in that campaign, but I will say for everything it does right, including a rebalancing of the party and its story about dealing with grief, certain narrative decisions and its price point can be an easy turnoff for some people. Above all else, though, is that central theme of death, and how wonderfully it's tackled between many different facets of the game. Mix that with how, again, this is the newest Persona title, and there's not too much wrong with starting with Persona 3 Reload. Persona 3 Portable is another weird one to make your first game. On one hand, you have your second and only other female protagonist in Kotone, but on the other hand, you have what's basically a remake of the base Persona 3 with a different coat of paint. I'll be honest, I wasn't originally going to include this one in the script for that very reason, but my shorts editor, Ian Igus, insisted I include it because of Kotone and the differences between this version of Persona 3 and Reload. So, here we are. Since we tackled a lot of what makes Persona 3 work in the previous section, I'll keep my thoughts brief. Persona 3 Portable was originally made with the PlayStation Portable in mind, meaning they didn't have the most power to work with. As a result, the game goes for a point-and-click style for everything outside of Tartarus, which is charming in a 2000s kind of way, but feels very odd as a lens through which you're supposed to immerse yourself in everything Tatsumi Port Island has to offer. There's also the very limited romance options for Kotone when compared to Makoto, if you care about that sort of thing, one of which is a child. For as much fault ATLUS should take for including that option, the onus is just as much on you if you choose to follow through on that, in my personal opinion. Finally, there's the matter of Kotone herself. I love the bits of personality she's able to express, and I especially like her winter look, but overall Kotone is for the most part pretty positive. While that does allow a different character's aspect on life to interact with Persona 3's theme of death, that aspect does feel like it clashes with the game's intentions at points. I can't get too deep into it here, but in my opinion, Portable feels best as a companion piece when played after one of the other versions of Persona 3, be it Reload or the PS2 release Persona 3 FES. Just don't play it immediately after, trust me, you're going to be burnt out on Tartarus so fast. Persona 4 Golden, the game full of sunshine and rainbows thanks to all the yellow. And murder! Don't forget about murder. Girl, get down from there! Persona 4 Golden has a lot of different things going for it as a starting game, the star of which just might be its setting. As someone who would just be getting into the Persona series, you might have some ideas of what you're getting into booting up your first game, but not a clear picture by any means. That same idea is seen in the story, as your protagonist Yu Narukami moves from the big city to a very small town. A giant shift in multiple ways. While you're here in this quaint town of Inaba, you'll also be able to know your neighbors quite well, including their personal issues. While this is also true of the characters you can interact with in Personas 3 and 5, I feel Persona 4 does an amazing job of getting you hooked into its setting, in part thanks to doubling as a murder mystery. That part right there is also a very easy way to draw people in who might not even be familiar with the RPG genre. Humans in general are messy bitches. We all want the tea and we all want to get down to the bottom of whatever nonsense is going on. While the intro may certainly be long and arguably the game's weakest point thanks to very little player control, there is a lot that is set up in those opening hours that pays dividends upon dividends upon dividends as they move forward from dungeon to dungeon. Mix that with a more robust fusion system than seen in Persona 3, dungeons that only further elevate your cast, an incredibly calming soundtrack, and again just the pure intrigue of a mystery that doesn't really step on the toes of any other games, and you kind of have a winning formula here. If you're recommending any title to a new fan, quite frankly, you cannot go wrong with sending them down the path toward Persona 4 Golden. We wrap up with Persona 5 Royal, a remake of a game that first started this whole journey for me. Like many other people who were already into Persona at the time, Royal ended up being a fantastic lockdown title. And honestly, it was either this or Animal Crossing. Look, I love Animal Crossing's design, but I need objectives and to-do lists, otherwise I'm just going to feel lost. Not the point of the video though. Joey, stay focused. So outside of needing to play Persona 5 Royal for the most bonkin' of characters, what can this game offer you that Persona 4 Golden can't? Honestly, it boils down to two big components. The protagonist's past, making it incredibly easy for a player to want to see them finally take a win at the end of the day, and some rather flashy combat. Persona 4 Golden's combat is fine, don't get me wrong, I'm not gonna sit here and diss the title that gave us Chie punting everything into the sun. But between technicals, individual personas having traits that can aid in combat, showtime attacks for return of guns, and the individualized splash screens at the end of all-out attacks, Persona 5 Royal just oozes in style, especially when you're out slaying shadows. All of that alone is a very easy reason to recommend the game. But I do have some hesitancy on saying it should be your first Persona game. Picture this. You're entering a theme park with a few friends for a few hours and have 10 different roller coasters to choose from. Most of them look okay to great, but this one looks super awesome. Multiple twists and turns, loop-de-loops, very steep drops, and underground segments. Without hesitation, you all decide to ride that roller coaster first. But now you're stuck with a dilemma. Everything else is going to feel worse as a result of picking the flashiest ride at the very beginning. All of this is to say, you can absolutely play Persona 5 Royal as your first Persona game, but going through the rest of the series, things might feel a bit tamer, is all. Now that we've gone through all the most recent versions, let me give some alternate versions of all of these experiences some shoutouts with the same lens of these being your first Persona experience. Persona 1 for the PlayStation 1 is great if you want to experience the true beginning of a Persona series. Though, if you're playing the US version, get ready for an incredibly localized mess with its fair share of problems. At least the game gets the diversity win for actually having a black party member though. We love you, Black Mark.
This story isn't racist, it's diverse. If everyone in it was white, then it would be racist.
I haven't played Persona 3 FES myself, but from what I gather, a lot of the features that version of Persona 3 had made their way into both Reload and Portable. This one's probably best if you want to run around Tatsumi Port Island as Makoto in its original incarnation, in probably the most difficult of all the Persona 3 versions. It also helps that it packs episode Aegis, titled The Answer in FES, on the disc as a part of a standard package instead of being an add-on, so hey, there's that. Base Persona 4 exists if you like girls who don't sound like they're in high school, a slightly different sounding teddy bear, and fog. Lots and lots of fog. This version is simply an aesthetic choice, if anything. Like, you can play this one first, but I'm going to look at you like I'd look at a white man wearing a kimono. So much side-eye. Pick up the updated version, bro. Seriously, what are you doing? And finally, all the spin-offs. No! If you start with Persona 5 Dancing in particular, I will dox. Allow me to conclude this video with the display of the games we've discussed today, in my personal order of most recommended to least recommended as your first title in Persona series. I'm not saying to play these games in order, and again, I would not recommend playing Portable right after Reload. No. What I am saying is I feel this is the order in which I feel it's easiest to sell a new Persona player on a game to the hardest. If you're able to convince someone to play Persona 2 Eternal Punishment PSP as their first Persona title, in all honesty, more power to you. Could not be me, but hey, seriously, congrats. Thanks very much for watching. Leave your thoughts and recommendations down in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Coming up next, I'm taking a break from using my voice. We've got 2 playlists coming up. Boss Battles Volume 2 featuring God Shattering Star from Fire Emblem Three Houses, and a shopping playlist featuring Coconut Mall from Mario Kart Wii. Another achievements video will come out right after that, but for now, take care. This is Joey Pals signing out.